Welcome to Reformed Thinking. If you've ever felt like morality is just a big list of rules meant to stop you from having any fun, well, you are not alone. Today, we're going to walk through a really helpful framework from C.S. Lewis that pushes back on that whole idea.
A lot of people can probably relate to this feeling, right? That morality is just restriction. And what's great is that Lewis totally gets it. He actually kicks things off by acknowledging this very common view with this quote from a schoolboy.
But Lewis immediately turns that idea on its head. He says, look, this is a complete misunderstanding. Moral rules aren't random restrictions from some cosmic killjoy. Think of them more like directions for running the human machine. Their whole point is to keep things from breaking down.
So right away, Lewis changes the conversation. He wants us to think of humanity as this incredibly complex machine, and moral rules are basically the owner's manual. To explain this, he uses this fantastic analogy of a fleet of ships to show the two main ways this human machine can fail. And you really can't separate these two things. It's a feedback loop. If the ships are constantly crashing into each other, they're not going to stay seaworthy for very long, are they? And on the flip side, if a ship's steering is busted, well, it has no chance of avoiding collisions in the first place.
All right, so let's break down that first part of morality. This is the one we all think of first, social harmony. Or, to stick with Lewis's analogy, it's about not smashing your ship into other people's ships.
This is all about not damaging the other ships in the fleet. Lewis points out that for most modern people, this is where the conversation about morality starts and where it ends. We're all very concerned with fairness between people, and we should be, but we often just stop there.
Exactly. And that leads to this kind of thinking. When someone says this, they're only focused on that first thing, avoiding collisions. They're totally ignoring the actual condition of their own ship, basically saying, as long as I don't hit anybody, what goes on inside is nobody's business but mine.
But Lewis says, whoa, hold on. Focusing only on the external stuff is a huge mistake. He tells us we have to look at the second concern, the internal state of each person. The seaworthiness of every single ship in that fleet.
And this is the real kicker. You can have all the rules of the sea you want, all the traffic laws for the fleet, but they are completely useless if the ships themselves are, as Lewis puts it, crazy old tubs that cannot be steered at all. If things like greed and cowardice are in the captain's chair, no amount of external rules is going to create a good society.
And this quote just nails it. It shows exactly why that second part of morality, the inside job, is so necessary for any society to function. Laws can put up guardrails for sure, but they can't change a person's heart. Without good people, people whose internal ships are actually in working order, any social system is going to fail, because broken people will always find a way to break it for their own gain. But wait, there's more. Even this isn't the complete picture. Lewis brings in a third part, one that's almost always forgotten, but gives meaning to the other two. Think about it. It's not enough for the fleet to just avoid collisions, and for each ship to be in good shape, if you have no idea where you're going. The voyage has to have a destination.
So this slide lays it all out pretty clearly. You've got harmony between people, harmony inside each person, and the overall purpose of life. Lewis says that modern folks almost always get stuck on part 1. They might think about part 2 sometimes, but they almost never get to part 3. And without knowing our destination, the first two just don't make much sense.
And this question is the pivot point for everything. Your answer to this question, what was man made for, is where different beliefs about the universe and God lead to completely different kinds of morality and behavior.
That's right. Lewis says your answer to that third question, our purpose, changes everything. And it starts with how you view yourself. Are you the owner of your life, the landlord, or are you a tenant?
This is such a critical distinction. If you believe you're your own property, then it's pretty logical to conclude that what happens inside your ship is your business alone. But if you believe, as a Christian does, that you were made by God for God, then you're a tenant. And that means you're responsible to the real landlord for how you maintain the property. You now have duties to him that go way beyond just not annoying your neighbors.
And the Christian view that every person lives forever, that completely changes the stakes. If you're only around for 70-odd years, a bad temper that gets a little worse over time might not seem like that big of a deal. But if you're going to live forever, that same slow slide could become, as Lewis puts it, absolute hell in a million years. The timeline changes how serious our internal state really is.
This belief also raises the status of the individual in a pretty radical way. If a person is an eternal soul, then they are far more significant than any temporary human structure, like a government or a civilization. And that has massive implications for, well, pretty much everything, from politics to how we value every single human life.
So, this is the question Lewis really leaves us with. To think clearly about morality, we have to think about all three parts: how we treat each other, what's going on inside of us, and what our ultimate destination is. We can't just be content with avoiding collisions. We also have to check our own engines, and most of all, know where we're headed.